If you really look at eugenics through the eyes of the cold-blooded psychopaths like Julian Huxley, they really saw people as just animals and insects, in fact. And even in their own peer group, they had lists of people that they said would help them get in under the scientific socialism, as they like to call different names for the same thing. But they said many would help them and they wouldn't get in themselves. They'd be shocked. George Bernard Shaw said the same thing. So you're living through an ongoing agenda. And then, of course, you had Kissinger many, many years ago, I think in the 70s, came out with his greatest threat to the state. You know. It wasn't just America, but the greatest threat America had, he said, was overpopulation. And as usual, folk thought, well, I guess this means it's the third world, because they're always publishing different figures of growing populations, but it was also your internal populations, of course. And Britain was exactly the same. They'd already been doing it in Britain. Even before World War II ended, they were talking about depopulating again. So you have many steps to go through. They've got to have enough people for wars if you need wars, right? And then as sciences get higher and higher, with efficiency and killing especially, then they need fewer and fewer people to do it all. Although they still like to have boots on the ground as a show to the public that wars hasn't changed that much. Wars changed tremendously, and they can really create wars with even satellites alone, without even using troops if they wanted to, and that might come one day, who knows. But we really go down the path where they decided long ago they really don't need us all anymore. I hope you understand that. They really don't, and they're quite open about it too, and not just the Georgia Guidestones, but I remember even listening to Manly P. Hall as an old man. He's giving one of his later, almost last talk. I don't know if it was his last or not, but he's a very old man at the time, and he got so agitated to just talk. He was on camera talking to his own group, and of course he himself was Rosicrucian and Freemasonic, but he got really agitated, and he was shaking like a really old guy does, and when he's getting agitated, and when it came to the planet, and what he was wanting to say but not quite getting was, you understand that these organizations also have this is a natural thing for the earth. Naturally, you can't destroy your home, but they also had this problem. But I hope people understand that if you go into the occult and even simple humanistic Freemasonry, the bottom is basically humanist. We're all brothers. We can all get around our differences, and the fellowship, brotherhood of man, etc. Sounds wonderful, but as you start going up the ranks, you'd find that you're getting introduced into a new way of seeing things, and superiorities, you see, inferior, superior, etc. And they'll start talking about the profane. You know, those folk out there who don't know anything, the profane. We're so enlightened, aren't we? As they swig their beer and so on. We all know these characters, I'm sure you do. But it gets worse and worse at the very top, until it isn't just the guy swigging the beer. The guys at the top swig brandy, and very good brandy at that, and are quite blatant, and there's no real emotion behind it. It's not like they're angry about things. People at the top don't really show fury and emotion because they're psychopathic. Psychopaths cannot tolerate frustration and anger. They tend to help stir up arguments between people, sit back and watch different people arguing with each other. They play out their aggression and their frustrations through other people. That's why they also have like wars and things, you know. But we're living through their agenda today because, as I've said so many times, Professor Quigley, talked about part of his role was training people to shape the new world on behalf of the elite group that he worked for, CFR, Royal Institute for International Affairs group, worldwide, and they churn out their diplomats and so on, and people who are in the State Departments for the US, and they train them and pick them from university for their roles as leaders and shapers of the world. People, you never even hear most of them, but they're the people who shape the world. They're the technocrats behind it all. They shape everything. and they're not really responsible. They don't get hauled up to the voters. The voters never know this is even going on. That's how it's always been. But Quigley said, and it's absolutely true about it, truthful statements about it. He said, talk about the amounts, incredible amounts of work for an agenda. It sometimes takes 50 years, like a 50-year plan to get culture to change one thing from here to there, 50. But he said, under wartime, as we're in today, we're at war with a virus, martial law, emergency powers. He said they can change everything culturally, legally, because they just make the rules up as they go along, and they've got the force. You don't, legally, and make you do whatever they want to do quickly, under threat of annihilation. We're here to save you. And he said you can do more done in 5 years of war than 50 years of peace, meaning peace and propaganda and education of the next generation of children. You always indoctrinate the children so they grow up, and they will. That's why. Why do you think children grow up and they're always arguing with their parents, for instance? Why do you think that happens? Why do you think that happens? But pretty well everything. Why do you think that happens? Because they're getting taught a completely different set of values and cultures and ways of looking at things than the parents had. Each generation, and by generation doesn't mean a whole lifetime. Again, they can work it out in 10 and 15 year spans with massive changes. You understand? And so what you're living through today is a massive change and push for utterly different values that will conflict with, not so much now, because the last couple of generations, really from the 50s onwards, really, or 60s onwards, definitely, you had the cultural contamination, as it was called. So you introduced a disease of a completely new way of looking at everything, including life itself, including children, or even having them or not having them, or is life sacred, is it not sacred, and all the things that Julian Huxley talked about. He said we'll have to knock people off their pedestal, the humanity off its pedestal, meaning the people, and where they think they're the most supreme being on the planet, to teach them that they're not, they're just another animal. Once they believe that, then you can do what you want with them. They'll accept it more easily. When you think you're sacred and you have rights, you fight things, you say. It's all been done. As I say, he was into Planned Parenthood and many, many other things, and are members of the eugenics societies and the Darwin's Club and so on. So yeah, you're living through an agenda right now. They couldn't get it all done. They tried, and it did raise it. Look at all the different groups that they've trained, these armies of youngsters who are almost ready to kill the older folk, because they've been trained older folk destroyed the planet for them. But that was their heritage then, and you all destroyed it, all you privileged folk, as they call people who scraped to get up there. They didn't live through, it was no heaven, believe you me. But they've trained them. Almost like a Bolshevik army ready to slaughter the people, or a Chinese cultural group where they let them loose on the adults and their teachers to eradicate their communism, the cultural revolution they called it. It's all the same tactics used by people who are well steeped and trained in this same thing, you see, because they use many groups and they always give them ideals, but the ones who run it all have different ideals and different agendas at the top, and different outcomes ultimately. So you're living through it again, and here you go, another crisis. I said it's like 9/11 Part 2, and you come out of this with a vastly, they've already said it over and over. Why do you think these articles are appearing from the elite themselves, that the world will never be the same again, and you'll never go back to the way it was? And my God, all the things they couldn't achieve, like austerity. I mean, I did talk after talk from United Nations publications on austerity programs that they were signing into law in every country. I've got them here in front of me right now. And yeah, all these austerity, how they would teach you to get off meat, and you'd obey them. And they would teach you what to eat, and to give you substitutes for meat and so on, with all the different insects and yada yada yada. That's all made a massive resurgence, hasn't it? It really has, massive resurgence. And the folk don't even know it's even happening. They float through it. But you realise your masters have got the whole planet now in a form of almost quiet, a kind of controlled desperation, because folk know everything is wrong. And they're going along with so many things which they really shouldn't be going along with. You cannot fight for centuries to gain the few rights that we got, temporary rights, you know, and just give it away because you're terrified, because you're never going to get them back again.